Welcome to HFY Stories. Please subscribe to the channel. Your one click means the world to me. The knife had crossed 3 chests before it reached hers, and she set it down on the mat without drawing it. Then she checked the charge on a pair of modified knuckle guards and told nobody in particular that she wasn't planning to cut anyone today. Rixith didn't understand yet what he was watching. Nobody in that crowd did. 100 cadets had packed themselves around the arena's edge on 30 minutes' notice, drawn by a rumor that a human had just humiliated Commander Veshkan in front of the entire third-year class and was now about to get flattened by a Vormatch twice her mass. Rixith had followed the noise same as everyone else. He just happened to know, by then, exactly how the story had started. It started with a lecture. Veshkan liked to open his unit on xenobiology with humanity, the same way other instructors opened with something easy to laugh at. He'd stood at the podium that morning with his scales oiled to a shine and ticked humanity's failures off on his claws like a shopping list. 1 heart, no venom, no plating, a homeworld that tried to kill its own species on a rotating basis. The room had eaten it up. 300 cadets from 40 species, laughing at a species none of them had ever fought beside. Rixith, who valued a fact over a punchline any day of the week, had mostly been irritated. Then a Vormatch in the third row asked why the coalition had bothered admitting humans at all, and Veshkan answered pity, and something in the back row stood up. She hadn't shouted. That was the part Rixith kept coming back to afterward. She never once raised her voice, and the room went quieter for it than it would have for any amount of yelling. Third year, 7th in her class, human. And everything the commander had just said, she informed him, was false. Veshkan tried to reassert the room, told her she was out of line. She told him evenly that he was out of facts and started giving him some. The persistence hunting bit landed first, a species without claws or venom that had spent its prehistory running things down until they died of exhaustion, because endurance was a weapon too if you were patient enough to use it. Then the bones. How a human skeleton, broken cleanly, regrew denser at the fracture than it had been before. Then the part that actually turned the room, pain, and how a human nervous system could apparently be argued with in ways most species couldn't. Then she drew the knife. Not a training blade, a real one, worn soft along the etching, and she held it up and told them exactly where it had been: a continent-wide war, a rebellion on Mars, a first-contact conflict Rixith had only read about in summary, 1 bearer per generation, 4 generations running, none of them dying when the numbers said they should. Then she gave Veshkan his own casualty statistics back with the context restored. A defensive stand that had bought 300,000 civilians of 14 other species time to get clear before the position fell. A battalion that hadn't forgotten the gravity systems. They'd sabotaged them on purpose, on a mission they'd known from the start they wouldn't walk away from. "We have nothing left to lose," she told him. "That should worry you more than it amuses you." Veshkan dismissed her from the hall with his voice cracking around the order. Rixith started clapping before he decided to. Others followed, ragged at first, then not. Which was how, 40 minutes later, a Vormatch named Tor stood across an open square from her, with 2 Krellians flanking him, informing her that a good speech didn't make her a soldier. She'd agreed to the challenge before he finished the sentence. Tor came at her the way big things came at small things, straight on, trusting mass over velocity to end it in one pass. She let him get close and wasn't where he expected, sliding under his reach and clipping the back of his knee on the way past. His leg buckled mid-stride. "Cute," he said. "Won't work twice." She didn't try it twice. She threw something small that bounced off his chest plate and did nothing, until it did, in a flash and a crack that put him on one knee with his hands over where his ears should be. By the time his vision cleared, she'd crossed half the arena. She wasn't hitting him to hurt him. She was hitting him to cost him, a jolt here, a jolt there, retreating before he could turn his size back into an advantage. He adjusted, stopped swinging, started herding, closing off the square until there was nowhere left for her to slide. She went up instead, planted one boot on his shoulder plate, twisted clear over his head, and the knuckle guards found the base of his skull with everything the charge had left. He didn't go unconscious. He went down like something structural had given way, and the instructor called it before he finished falling. Tor took her hand to stand, looking at her less like an enemy now than a problem he'd need new tools for. How, he asked, not a challenge this time. You favor the charge. I read your file. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. Veshkan found her an hour later, and Rick Sith, who had no business being in that corridor and knew it, got close enough to a door that hadn't quite latched to hear the rest. The commander didn't lead with anger. He led with a number, spat out like an accusation. Mixed species units fielding humans showed a fifth again as many survivors as units without. He'd checked, somewhere between the lecture and now. He wanted to know what that proved. That we've spent our whole history learning how not to die, she said, and we brought the habit with us. He asked why she'd staged all of it, the speech, the fight, the audience. She told him she'd staged nothing except a chance for people to see the gap between assumption and fact, and that it was worth whatever he decided to hand her for it. The silence on the other side of that door ran long enough that Rixith started counting it. When Veshkan spoke again, something in his voice had come loose from its mounting. I built 15 years of lectures on a number I never once checked, he said. That's on me, not on you. He offered her a trade instead of a punishment. Run something official for the cadets nobody bothered training, and let it succeed or fail where everyone could see it. Agreed, she said. Then, before he could close it out, you asked if I meant what I said in there. I did. Every word of it stands. Then make me believe it twice, he said. Not with a speech this time. Watch the numbers instead. I'll let those talk. The numbers talked for 6 months. Rixith watched it happen from the observer's bench most weeks. Cadets who'd been failing simulations passing them, names climbing out of the bottom, rankings one training cycle at a time, not because anyone had gotten stronger overnight, but because someone had finally shown them how to spend what they already had. Veshkan sat in on more than one session, said less than he used to. Rewrote at least 2 of his lectures, Rixith heard, though nobody ever got him to admit which ones. On graduation day, Rixith stood in the crowd and watched Kira Vale cross the stage third in her class, behind 2 cadets who trained for it their whole lives. Half the assembly rose before protocol asked them to, her students, on their feet, applauding louder than the ceremony called for. Afterward, in the crush outside the hall, Rixith caught up to her. She had the knife on her belt again, sheathed, the etching catching the light for just a second before her jacket settled over it. 4 generations, he said. What happens to it now? She unclipped the sheath and held it out to him, not the blade, just the empty leather, worn thin at the edges. 5th one still deciding what she carries it for. Then she folded it back against her hip and walked into the sunlight without looking back, and Rixith stood there a long moment before he followed, already wondering which battlefield he'd see her on next.